All right, guys, it's Lauren Lando today with another installment of the interview. Today it's with none other than Coach Dan Pap. Coach Pap is regarded as one of the best movement specialists in the world. I've had the fortunate opportunity to watch him about 15 years ago. I was introduced to Coach Pap. I went down with the Seattle Seahawks when they went down to the University of Texas and was able to watch Coach Pap in action and not necessarily knowing what it was he was doing. I was just watching. And as of recently, about a year ago in January, I was able to, fortunate enough to spend some time down at Altus with Coach Pap and the group of coaches down in Arizona. And if you ever get the chance, I highly, highly suggest going down and watching what they do down there. It's unlike anything. Not just the athletes that you'll see in front of your eyes, the coaching, but also the subtleties of coaching that happens there as well. I'm a big fan of watching the interaction of coaches, and to me it was a masterful orchestration of autonomy and a guidance that you all provide down there. So, Coach, hopefully that's a decent, I know I didn't do you justice, but hopefully that's a decent start, and we'll find out a lot more about you as we go.
Okay. Well, you were very kind.
So, Coach, how long have you been in the performance enhancement track and field world?
I started as a high school coach in Ohio in the autumn of 1973. So about 43, 44 years now.
Wonderful, and I'm sure that journey has shown you quite a bit. Do you mind telling our viewers a little bit of your chronological path? Obviously, we all know you're at Altus right now, but what got you to Altus?
Well, like I said, I started out as a high school coach in Ohio. Back then, you coached whatever was in season. So offensive coordinator in football, wrestling coach, basketball coach, intramural director, taught hard sciences, so I was science curriculum chair, track and field coach, summer baseball, um, pretty much you name it, we had to do it. It was a small farm school, so I spent 6 years in high school coaching. Moved to the University of Houston with Tom Tellez, my main mentor, and was a grad assistant there for 2 years. From there, I went to Wichita State in Kansas for a year, University of Texas, El Paso for 2 years, LSU for 11, University of Texas for 8, various independent stints, University of Florida for 2, uh, ran the OTC in Chula Vista for the USOC for a year, and ran the main Olympic Training Center in the UK, leading into the London Games in 2012, and now I'm at Altus in Phoenix. So pretty peripatetic lifestyle as a coach.
Right, moved around quite a bit. Um, when I had the opportunity to be around the group at Altus, you talked a little bit about your time with Coach Tellez, but really what led into getting that job. Can you explain a little bit of the nature at which you went at getting his attention?
Well, like I said, I was a science teacher, so I was immersed and in love with science. And Coach Tellez was one of the first coaches I heard at a clinic talk in scientific terms, particularly biomechanics. So I started stalking the guy. So wherever he gave a clinic or a lecture, I was there. And he was at UCLA at the time, and he had just taken the head job at the University of Houston. And I knew that, it was a startup for him, and poor facilities, poor budget, poor staff. So I asked him if he could use help. He said, sure, but he had no funding. So loaded the wife up in a U-Haul, and we moved to Houston. Didn't know a soul.
Wow. Quite the leap of faith, right?
Well, I think if you want to do something, you find a way.
Yeah. Now, as your first job with Coach Tellez, you were a jack of all trades, right? You kind of did it all, right?
Yeah, I raked pits and measured runs and timed people and mowed the grass and dug sand pits and watched the weight room and recruited and drove the van, pretty much a gopher.
But that's one of the things that we're using this platform of ESS is to really educate the young coaches and the young practitioners coming into the field and really talking to them about the volunteering your time and no job is too little, no job is too big. You put your hand in, you help out, and you learn along the way. But I think too many times I see a lot of young kids come into our program and they want to know how much they're going to be making, and you know, those are red flags right there. But the common thing that you're letting us know is there was no job that was below you, and wherever you could help, you were helping.
Well, I grew up in the country and a farmer's lifestyle, and the job was done when the job was done. And there are a lot of years on a farm you don't get paid. You just survive. So I think I grew up with that ethic. And I don't think I really got paid what I consider a fair wage until I was in the business maybe 40 years.
Wow. Wow. Now, after University of Houston, there were stints at UTEP and LSU, and I know LSU was the longest stint. Can you talk a little bit about UTEP and the program that you developed there, and then also your roles and what you did with LSU?
But at UTEP, I walked into a huge international track and field situation. They struggled to recruit Americans there, so the previous regimes had recruited very hard internationally. And my second year there was an Olympic year, 1984 Olympics. And I think the team had about 20 kids on somebody's Olympic team, so I dove right into world class, international class track and field before the age of 30.
Wow. That's a lot of pressure, I would imagine.
Uh, well, it seems like my whole life I've always started way over my head and had to dig out of the hole, so it was just a continuation of the saga, really.
Nice. And now, with those world-class athletes and going from where you had been at University of Houston, obviously you had some high-level caliber athletes. What were the biggest things that you saw a difference? Was it the genetic factor? Was it the years of coaching? What were the things that seemed to separate?
Well, I think all those things are players. The biggest thing for me at UTEP was advanced age athletes with European coaching philosophies. So with Coach Tellez at Houston and my experience as a high school coach, you know, reading and going to clinics and schools, it was kind of a North American bias. So at UTEP, I was exposed to Norwegians and Swedes and Africans and Caribbean, uh, a whole different way of looking at coaching and teaching, pedagogy, what have you.
A lot more movement focused, would you say?
I think a lot more attention to detail, uh, a lot less training than I thought needed to go on, quality over quantity, uh, and probably a more universal palette like diet, nutrition, sleep, travel, things like that were just at a higher level there.
More of that holistic approach that we
Yes.
look at. Now, Coach, after that, the LSU position, you had a stint there for about 11 years. Talk to me a little bit about, was it male and female teams that you worked with there?
Yeah, it was a combined program, and my two bosses were Billy Maxwell and Warren Seagrave. And we took a women's program that was floundering. I don't even know if they'd had a girl make it to the national meet. In 11 years, we won 17 NCAA titles with men and women. I think 9 in a row outdoors with the women, 7 of 9 indoors, and 2 with the men back to back.
Wow, that's quite the success. That's quite the success.
Well, we had a very young, innovative, scientific, systematic staff. And I think we were probably a little bit ahead of the curve. And we were young enough in our career and our families that we could devote a lot of time and energy to it.
Now, Coach, I've been fortunate enough to watch you coach a few different times now, and the one thing that really strikes me is your choice of words. Your choice of words seem to be few but perfectly timed. You give a ton of autonomy to your athletes and to your other coaches. Is that how you've always been, or is that something that you've matured into with time and age?
I think it's a maturity process. I think when I was a young coach, I overthought and overcoached daily. Um, in the school of hard knocks, the school of frustration makes you dig deeper. How can you simplify, ergonomically be more sound? Um, cueing's a big part of what we do, and trying to find analogies or cues that have power but don't cause people to drift from flow state or paralyze them with motor schemes.
Right, that seems to be something that we run into a lot in our industry is coaches always want to show how much they know, and so because of that, they just turn the fire hose on and make the athlete drink out of the fire hose, and it's too much information, is what I've found.
Yeah, I think good athletes know good coaching, and I don't think you have to sell for athletes to figure out whether you're a good coach or not.
Right. And to the autonomy piece, is that something that you find you can do with the older athlete, or is that something that, again, you've matured into that with younger athletes and older athletes, is treat them like adults and hopefully they'll take the reins and become adults? Is that part of the philosophy mindset as well?
Well, I think it goes back to pedagogical foundations. As a teacher, you can't be in there with them when they take a final exam. So the pedagogical process is towards independence and mastery. And if that's truly two of your driving points of philosophy, then I think you end up where you end up.
Well said, well put. Well put. So let's go into coaching philosophy a little bit. Obviously, the coaching pedagogy side of things you've talked about from the psychological aspect, but if you can give me some of your coaching philosophies just from the psychological aspect, the biomechanical and biological, and if I'm forcing those on you, go ahead and roll with whatever are your streaming thoughts and philosophy. I'd love to hear.
Well, I think that the sport process should be fun, interesting, challenging, mutual, uh, enjoyable. I think it should be a partnership. I think that mastery and health should be two of the huge drivers of the process.
Sorry, I'm taking notes as we go.
Not a problem. You could always review the tape.
That's right. That's right. So the on the fun that was the biggest thing that I noticed down at Altus was it was the atmosphere was loose. The athletes really seemed to feed off of that. It seemed like fuel to the workout. A lot of fun amongst the coaches coaching as well. It was just a unique atmosphere. I have in my notes from there, like, this is something I've got to create more of, less rigid and more autonomy and fun.
Well, I think sport in its foundation goes back to military training. And I think that a lot of coaches, especially in our generation, were brought up in military type environments of coaching. And I chafed under that. I grew up in the protest era of the 60s and 70s and was kind of rebellious on that front. And I said, if I ever get into a leadership role, it's not going to be a dictatorial, militaristic environment. That said, I think somebody has to be in charge, and there has to be systems and policies. But kids get into sport because they're interested and it's fun. And if we destroy interest and fun, then we've really destroyed the initial driver for their interest.
Right, really taking to heart the LTAD model, but running with that LTAD model all the way through the highest level of athletics or highest level of athlete development too.
Well, at Altus, we have kids as young as 5 or 6, and we have masters as old as 86. And you talk to our older guys that are in their 80s, and you're like, why are you out here every day? And because it's fun.
And I could see too when I was down there seeing a couple of those master athletes, and one, they're smiling as they're running their 400s, they're skipping, they're hitting all their dribbling exercises and drills. But what it seemed too is they were there a lot of times before the elite athletes would show up, and it almost served as like a little bit of accountability to the elites, motivation to the elites to see these guys out here still pushing it.
Yeah. Well, as athletes, there's a tendency in elite athletes to get pretty narcissistic. And when they show up, and these guys, one of the guys just had a stroke 6 months ago, and he's out there every day hitting a lick. And I'm like, you're complaining of a hangnail. This guy just overcame a stroke. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
Now, one thing when we were out at the track as well, I had such a great time out there, but one thing out the track, you make sure that everybody that is there that's watching has free access to the athletes. You and your coaching staff clearly state, go up, ask them questions. What's this drill like for you? How does it feel? What is your training like? How is it different from where you've been before? And to me, I thought that was really interesting that you allowed us to do that. But I remember, too, one thing that you said the greats love an audience. And that I'll never forget that because it's so true. They always want to perform. I've got to believe by having us as coaches ask the athletes a little bit about their training, one, it shows a little bit further buy-in into the training and how much they understand what you all are doing with their bodies. Do you find that there's a greater level of buy-in when you have coaches around who are watching these athletes perform day in and day out?
For sure. And I think it bleeds back in some of our philosophical mission statements. We want to be a resource center for all coaches, performance staff, therapists, athletes, what have you. And to truly be a resource center, you have to have auditing. And so when you guys come in, it's like getting an external audit. You're checking on us. Are we doing what we advertise? And one of our mission statements, we want our athletes to be PhDs of their event area. And if they are PhDs, then they should be able to hold a conversation at a pretty deep level on multiple fronts, on multiple topics.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. It teach them the hows and the whys, and it makes the buy-in a lot easier.
Yeah.
Now, Coach, kind of a little bit of a segue, but not too much. There's so much talk these days about screens and what screens are valid and what aren't. Give me an idea philosophically, your view of a screen. What is the screen for you?
Well, I think topics like this breed polarity. You have people like, screens are awesome, and other people like screens are ridiculous. Personally, I think coaches have been doing screens for over 100 years. It's called watching practice with purpose. So every menu item that we put an athlete through is a screen, whether it's a weightlifting exercise, a warm-up drill, a cool-down drill, ancillary training, main event training. If it's movement, like we watch people get out of their car in the parking lot, walk into the track. We're watching their body language, posture. So everything from the time they get on site till they leave, for me, is a screen. I think the clinical screens that are being discussed are just a part of the spectrum of screening. I think that a lot of clinical screens, by the time you find something, it's already been a major problem.
No, that's very, very, very true.
I think guys that have been in the business a long time, you can watch a guy warm up and say something's not right. Well, that's screen.
Right. And I think, too, that the screens are a good tool for a young coach who's maybe needs the bumpers on the car still a little bit and really doesn't know what he's seeing quite yet because he hasn't had the experience of hundreds of thousands of athletes in front of him to see a commonality in movement patterns that may represent a movement fault.
Yeah, and I think that learning to see movement is a process. It's a journey. And if stationary or walking gait screens help you on that journey, then what's the harm?
Absolutely. Well, and it's just like you said, I mean, from start to finish, people always say, well, when do you retest? When do you retest? it's happening daily, every minute
Yeah,
throughout the workout.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And part of I think the problem people get into is, let's be honest, when we're born, we're injured. We come out of the birth canal, and it's downhill from there. So we go through series of injuries and falls and tumbles and collisions, and the body compensates. And this compensation process is endless. And if we intervene with some things, maybe we shift it a little bit more towards wellness. But a high level training athlete is always in the process of adapting to small injury. So the bigger question is, where is the tipping point on asymmetry or muscle imbalance or gait abnormalities? That's probably the bigger question at the elite level, is where is the tipping point where we need to intervene or go to plan B?
Right. Is there pain? Usually that's one of the best indicators. If there's pain, then we start back engineering and working backwards. But sometimes we find ourselves trying to correct something that maybe shouldn't be corrected, or you have to be careful what you're opening up.
Yeah, it's like discus throwers. World-class discus throwers peak in their 30s generally. They've had millions of throws, so there's actually a little bit of functional scoliosis to the side they throw with. If you get their spine neutral, they couldn't throw it out of the circle.
And we find that a lot with swimmers as well. There's that functional scoliosis that happens over time, and a lot of these athletes with one side dominances, they're going to have that, and that makes them special. Do we want to take that away?
And let's be honest, if you're coaching a power speed kid that sprints, whatever legs forward in their stance is going to undergo unique ergonomic tasks compared to the rear leg. So there's always running gait dysymmetry because of that process. And where is the tipping point is critical.
Right. So, Coach, let's take a step past the screen and intake side. Needs analysis. You always talk about KPIs, key performance indicators. Obviously, things that are critical to be successful in a certain sport: leverage, fiber typing, your genetics, your understanding of the sport. Uh, Throw in some things there that I'm leaving out in your viewpoint of KPIs.
Well, I think that first stop is KPI is a double-edged sword. So there's key performance indicators on one side of the sword and key performance inhibitors on the other. So when we do an induction or a debrief, we go through these things and come up with a listing of what are the key essential items for success in your discipline, and what are the inhibitors that you are presenting. And then realizing that hierarchy reorganizes through the training year, through experience, through education. Uh, there's technical, tactical, lifestyle is a big one, mental skills, wellness. Those are some of the big ticket items. Like a lot of the elite track and field athletes we have currently, this year is an Olympic year, most of the KPIs are on mental skills. These people are already world-class athletes. They know how to train, they know how to stay healthy, they have a good plan, but the mental skills are the things that derail the train in an Olympic year. So that the mental skills are higher KPI listing on the hierarchy than maybe event proficiency for some of these athletes.
Right. Tasks that they've been able to do for the last 3 years without thinking twice about it. Now, as we get closer to the Olympic Games or to trials, now they start overthinking or confidence becomes an issue. I truly believe that all of our elites have performance anxiety, and most of them, will shield it with extreme confidence. Some will actually, show it posturally, and they'll show it in their who they are in front of you. But others, you have to peel the onion and really get them to divulge what it is that is bothering them. Is
Yeah.
that what you're finding as well? What you find?
Yeah, I mean, mental resilience is a layered, nuanced process, and we use a lot of special forces modeling on that and analysis. Um, for some, it's family of origin issues that flare up under extreme stress. For others, it could be icebergs, deeply held beliefs that are no longer useful. Um, it's a minefield in Olympic year, and We use our network pretty extensively. A lot of times, just identifying it and discussing it will start the process. Sometimes you need to bring in expert help.
No, absolutely. I do find that once you've opened up, a circumstance or scenario with an athlete, then you have to find that person who's much more skilled than for myself. Instead of myself, I can sit there and try to build your confidence, but if there's a deeper seating issue, that's when we have to go to our tool and find out who the best practitioner is for them.
Yeah, and I think it's dangerous. It's a delicate tightrope there. I think a lot of coaches fancy themselves as, pretty good psychologists. And early in my career, I made this mistake thinking I was Sigmund Freud, and I did some damage, and I learned from that. And so now I'm pretty quick to reach into the network of experts.
Well, Coach, that's one thing that at all the poolside chats that you were always so open with is you would talk about success and failures all in the same breath, and learning from this and learning from that. Where I think too many coaches try to really paint the picture that everything's perfect and I always do right. Heck, that's where we learn is when we've done wrong and we actually realized it.
Well, I think anybody that's been in this business a long time should be fairly humble because they're where they're at because they've failed millions of times.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that helps create the empathy for our athletes, for us to be able to sit there and say, look, it's okay. We've been there, done that, and now we move on. We learn from it, but we move on. So, Coach, going on to, I really am excited to hear this answer from you, and I know I'm kind of pigeonholing you with this answer or this question a little bit. What is the most common movement fault or inefficiency you see in sprint mechanics with a new athlete coming to work with you? I'm
Um,
sure there's a lot.
yeah, I'd probably put it into two categories: improper posture for that step
Okay.
and improper use of levers.
Okay.
At the end of the day, to get faster, we have to have an appropriate posture and an appropriate use of levers to leverage the process to get faster.
I remember just being out there last January, there was one thing that I saw that was a commonality that everybody was doing out of acceleration. And I think my mind's eye always looked for that, power line position and parallel shin angles of the lead leg and the rear leg. But one thing I was noticing was this slight kick forward of the lead leg where you were actually opening that shank up just a little bit, not obtuse, but it was getting closer to a 90-degree angle where I think in years past, I think a lot of people had always talked about pulling that shin back and keeping it more acute. I started seeing this trend, and when I came back, and I talked to a couple of your coaches about it, and I started implementing with a few of my coaches, and I saw a drastic difference in just first step power out of a 2-3 point start with just that slight kick of the toe forward. It was pretty crazy, and to me, to your point. It seems like just the proper angulation of that tibia to create a little bit more torque at the knee and the hip on that first step in acceleration.
Well, I think that starting is a product of starting strength and power output and coordination and skill and efficiency. There's a lot of balls you're juggling when you initiate and overcome inertia in those first 4 or 5 steps. So the delicate balance between time on the ground, time in the air, angles, and the lines of force are critical. And sometimes people in the process to excellence have to find bridge positions for mastery until they master that level of efficiency, and then they can get more towards the model. I think there's a real, probably dangerous trend in trying to teach people to too strict a model in too short a timeline. So for us, the art is what adaptations and idiosyncrasies can we allow while shifting people towards a theoretically more sound model.
Right, yeah, a lot of different things. Relative strength plays a massive role in that, and you take an athlete who maybe doesn't have the same relative strength as another, and you try to get them to cast that toe forward a little bit. they're going to have a problem. They're probably going to break at the trunk when they strike the ground. They're not going to be able to be strong enough to be able to be propulsive in that nature.
Yeah, and the only reason you would play with shank angles is because of idiosyncrasies. What's their time on the ground and how are you going to burn it efficiently? And if a person has poor power output and you're playing with time on the ground, you're really barking up the wrong tree, in my opinion.
One thing that I heard a couple of your coaches say, and I think it was you in particularly, you were doing treatment on somebody and watching another athlete start, and you told the athlete to have more patience and acceleration. I think they were trying to be too quick coming out instead of getting that good strong push, and just the simplistic nature at which you said that. Be more patient. And the thing that I loved is your voice matched what you wanted. It wasn't a rushed answer. It came out like pouring a glass of water. It was fantastic how you bridged that.
Yeah, I think athletes have certain tendencies, or we call them viruses, that get in the way. So a lot of people misconstrue a lot of frequency at the start with being fast. And in world-class jumping and sprinting, there's a unique relationship of stride length and stride frequency and ground time and air time that produces the best runs. So trying to orchestrate cues or analogies that trigger the athlete into those kinematic factors is our puzzle daily.
Absolutely. Now, Coach, I know over your career, 43 years of your career, 44 years, you've had a lot of highlights. Can you share a few of those with us? I know you don't talk about yourself like that.
Yeah, I mean, I get asked questions like this all the time, like, where's your favorite country? Who is your favorite athlete? And my response is, I really don't have favorites. Everybody's pretty unique. Every place is pretty unique. The journey is unique. So I just say I had a blessed journey.
Love it. That's a best answer right there. Can you talk a little bit to the emotional toll that working with elite athletes creates? Athletes who are competing year round, athletes who are expecting podiums, athletes whose livelihoods depend on it. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, it's a tough journey. I think a lot of young coaches aspire to be there, but they have no idea what sitting in that chair involves. Uh, the victories, the finals, the podiums, those are easy. Uh, the losses, the injuries, the disappointments, the dreams being extinguished, those are the hard bits.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's to your point. I think a lot of young coaches will come down and see the athletes that you work with, or come into a facility like ours or Exos and see those athletes, and this is what I want to do, and they really have no idea how much pressure is really on the coach in that seat. And to your point, like, it's not about the victories. Everybody's there for the victories. It's when the career comes to a halt. It's when there's a loss. It's when I work with a lot of mixed martial artists. It's when there's a knockout, a bad injury. Those are the times that really, really tug at the heartstrings pretty.
Yeah, it was just like last summer. Two of the young men I work with went gold and silver in the world championship in the long jump. So on top of the world, one of the guys had been on the injury train for 4 years, came back out of nowhere to win a silver medal. So accolades, everybody's fired up. But then the long jump girl I had from Canada was ranked top 3 going in, got an injury at the worst time, a weird freak injury, finishes 4th, misses a medal by centimeters. And dealing with that for 2 or 3 days far overshadowed the success of the other two boys earlier in the champs.
Right, right. Okay, Coach. So, advice. Obviously, you have a tremendous amount of advice. You've given a lot of great nuggets of information and deep wisdom within just this interview. Young coach coming out, what is simple advice you would give them?
Find a mentor, develop your network, and make sure it's diverse, and not just in sport.
Right. I'm sure the time you spent as a teacher probably prepared you more for the coaching side than anything.
Yeah, I think one of the best training grounds for a coach in high performance is to be a classroom teacher for a year.
Coach Pfaff, thank you so much for your time. What I'd like to do is end with the closing remarks, just anything that you have that's coming around the calendar for Altus. I know you all just finished up in Vancouver. You just finished up in the Cayman Islands. Talk to me a little bit about what's coming up. I know you have the apprentice program that is year-round. What dates do you have on that?
Usually it's every month. It's usually early in the month. If people go to our website, it's way more knowledgeable than I am. And we also have some therapy courses coming up
Okay.
where we introduce people to what we call performance therapy. Um, to be honest, our calendar and schedule changes every week, so I'd be remiss if I put it out there, but the website is up to date, and thanks for giving us a plug there.
Absolutely. Can you give us the website real quick?
Yeah, it's altusworld.com.
Okay. And if you do not follow Altus on Twitter, on all your social medias, you're missing out because they give out great information. They show great drilling. They show great in-session skills and drills that the athletes are doing right in front of you. What an amazing resource you all are putting together down there, not to mention the incredible athletes who are performing at a high level. So, Coach, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me and answering my questions.
Yeah, not a problem. I really appreciate what you guys do up there in Denver, too.
Thank you so much, Coach.